ASCDI. We're now going to talk a little bit about the state of merger and acquisitions. What you should know if you plan on selling your companies. There's been several pretty big deals in our industry in the last couple of years. A lot of them having to do with ITADs and ITAD services, and we brought together really the leading experts in this industry on M&A and what's going on. So I will let you guys introduce yourselves. We are starting. I think Todd, we're starting off with you.
Yeah. Once again, Todd Bone, founder of XSI. We sold our company last year to Everdex out of Paris, France. So definitely have some experience in that area. And then we'll go around and do quick introductions. Dave, you want to start?
Dave Cummings, managing partner, Agile Equity. We're a New York City-based investment banking firm representing IT services and software companies only.
Thanks, Dave. Rike?
Hey, I'm Rike Sandlin, CEO of River Vista Partners, a consulting organization. I used to operate an ITAD, and now I help other ITADs with go-to-market strategy, operations, ESG, and M&A.
Great. Eric?
Hi, Eric Ingebretsen, Chief Commercial Officer at TESS, previously known as TESSAM. Some people might be more familiar with that name. And at large global ITAD and recycling player, I've got overall global responsibility for sales and marketing for the company.
And I'll finish up with my good friend Lenny, introducing him. Lenny's a founding member of Flatiron Law Group, handling sell-side M&A. He actually represented XSI, and he's a nationally recognized speaker on M&A and technology transactions. And he's an architect of one of my favorite softwares, which saved years off my life in going through acquisition because it organized everything. It made it so easy for me to go through an undaunting task of due diligence, and uses that in his practice. And they're unique also because they're a flat fee transaction law firm, and he'll explain a little bit of that as we go here. But thanks everybody for joining us. All of you guys are certainly my favorite people in the ITAD industry and in the industry. Want to get into the meat of the presentation here. Dave, since you're very involved with the M&A activity, can you give us an overview of what's going on in the ITAD space here recently and in 2023, 24?
Yeah, I think that, obviously there's a lot of economic uncertainty out there. The debt markets have changed dramatically over the last, 3 to 4 quarters. But having said all that, we really operate, in the lower middle market, as does, the ASCDI and other organizations like SIA. So really the sub $100 million enterprise value market has been really unaffected by, some of the changes in the debt market. So I would say overall, transaction volume is down, but it's still very, very robust, and good quality companies, are still being acquired in the space. We're actually in market now with a couple of ITAD deals, and things are going well. So I would say that, if you've got some wind at your back and have had some strong operational performance over the last, couple of fiscal years, there's always, buyers that are willing to look at good quality companies.
Good. Do you have any examples of recent transactions?
Yeah, let me just go through a couple of slides that we put together, and we'll make sure that both Karen and Joe provide, these slides to all the participants if you'd like it. So a little bit more about us. We've seen a lot of economic boom to bust cycles and a lot of different, M&A economies. I think the biggest thing that we would say here is that, M&A markets are dynamic. They're not static. What is market today may not be market next week, next month, next quarter. So I think that, closely held business owners, sort of need to keep that in mind, when looking at potentially exiting or harvesting a business for sale. The overall ITAD market has some good total addressable market and some really good stories to tell. I think at both the federal and state level, obviously, there's a lot of need to recycle, and there continues to be big corporate demand to search out these things. So the market's growing at about 8% a year. U.S. market is very strong, and the market continues to be, heavily fragmented, as Eric and Rike will tell you.
Yeah, it's kind of ripe for acquisitions.
So here's some recent deals. Obviously, we were involved in the XSI transaction with Evernext, Ultratech Holdings, which was a UK company acquired by Restore. Obviously, Eric can give you his feedback on the TESAM transaction. The big one that everybody talked about, and I think the real tipping point of this industry, was when Iron Mountain came in and put a big bid out there for IT Renew. And IT Renew obviously was, a big entity, but I think that really was the coming out party, if you will, for ITAD. So these are just some transactions over the last, 2 to 4 quarters that have clicked off in the space. And I think you'll continue to see more good quality deals, in the space.
Now, it's always, everybody always wants to know, well, what's my company worth? And it varies based on a strategic acquisition versus private equity get involved into the marketplace, to the size of your organization, to the clients and all that kind of stuff. What kind of scale are you seeing? And I'm talking, maybe a multiple of EBITDA. What kind of ranges are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously valuation's part art, part science, right? I mean, one of the reasons why typically you want to run a process or you want to talk to multiple buyers is because, each company identifies and views businesses materially differently. But, there's value enhancers and there's value, things that you'll get knocked on. But I would say really, if you've got a good quality business, a multiple of EBITDA, which is really TTM, trailing 12 months, it's probably talking like 6.5 to maybe 9.5. I mean, obviously they can be lower, they can be higher, depends upon obviously the underlying makeup of the revenue and the EBITDA. But overall, high single digit multiples of EBITDA is what we're currently seeing in the market today.
Right. And a company that just resells product, they're going to be probably more in the 2 to 3 range.
Well, I mean, if you're just selling product, maybe the metric isn't EBITDA, the metric might be revenue. And then if the metric is revenue, it could be anywhere from 0.50 x all the way up to maybe 1.25x. Mm-hmm. But typically, buyers like to use EBITDA, and the reason why they like to use EBITDA is because it's the proxy of free cash flow. It's really what we use in the industry to benchmark and price off of.
Right. Thanks, Dave, for that. Rike, before companies, get to that, thought process of wanting to sell, there's things that they should be doing to position themselves. And I know that you've been through some sales and also consulting with companies. What are some of the things that you're getting asked for from the ITAD industry for assistance with?
Yeah, I think one of the things that buyers are going to be most interested in is reducing their risk. So the ITAD will talk about revenues, they'll talk about EBITDA, they'll share a lot of financial information, but but as part of the due diligence, the buyers are challenging the ITADs. How are you controlling for risk? How are you reducing that risk? And so, in my consulting practice, what I see a lot of is how do we organize the ITAD business in a way that mitigates that risk? Things like controls, process controls, certifications. Do they have an ESG program? Because that's definitely a driving factor in the future. What are these things that we're doing to control for risk? That also includes securing revenues, right? So, are your revenues and your margins based on transactional kind of activity, or do you have long-term contracts with your suppliers, with your clients for providing services and maintaining those relationships? That's a way to mitigate risk.
As a part of your consulting business, I've just thought of this, I didn't ask you before, are you being asked to help guide a sales plan or introductions to other entities in the
Yeah,
industry?
I have to be careful. I'm not a broker.
Right.
I'm not out there marketing companies to buyers.
Yes.
But I am asked to help help advise them along that path. And so
I'm saying more in terms of, here's how you can grow your ITAD business. Here's some people in the industry I can introduce you to that may want to subcontract you, or you can subcontract, or it could be a partnership.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm getting questions from the buy side as well. Strategic buyers or PE firms that want to know who the reputation of some of the companies in the industry and their strengths and weaknesses. So I do some of the due diligence activities as well, depending on the relationship and the deal.
Gotcha. Now let's switch to Eric on the buy side.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine you guys were pretty active before COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
Take us through how TESS has changed in terms of, pre-COVID. What were you doing during COVID? I know that you've done some investments in some battery recycling plants. And then what's the roadmap for acquisitions moving forward?
Yeah, happy to go through that. It's changed pretty dramatically for us for different reasons. Partially before we were private equity backed before, and that was always obviously aimed at an exit in it. And so investments we were making at that point were all kind of aimed around that exit in it. So big investments in battery recycling in it. Obviously set up a large facility in Singapore. Continued that investment. Actually, we're commissioning our site in Shanghai right now and working on another one in Rotterdam that'll be commissioned by the end of this year. And that actually helped us with our valuation going into the acquisition with SK Eco Plant, just because battery valuations are very different than kind of ITAD recycling type valuations in it, which is one of the things that really helped our multiple significantly there. So that was really the focus kind of going through COVID and kind of up to the acquisition point was getting better at what we did, and from a kind of an investment and acquisition perspective, really focusing on the battery side of things. Since then, we're kind of on the other side of that fence now, but very long-term view of things owned by SK. That's one of the biggest companies nobody's ever heard of, including me, before we were acquired. In it, Korean-based firm, revenues of roughly $130 billion annually, so significant business. And they continue to be very focused on the battery space, and so there's deep investments we're going to continue to make there. We also believe, from an acquisition perspective, that playing in adjacent spaces is kind of where we need to put a focus, and that answer is going to be different for everybody. But for TESS, because we happen to have a good bit of scale and we're in lots of different places already, to put up another, to buy an ITAD business in a given geography, and we would do it if it was opportunistic, but it's not something we're focused on. We're pretty focused on adjacent services, things like warranty service, maintenance service, managed deployment type services, smart hands and feet, something further up the food chain than where we are, that gets us more into that strategic partner category with our customers.
That makes a lot of sense. Dave, back to you. What are you hearing as things that buyers are looking for in terms of companies that they're looking to acquire?
In the ITAD space, it's obviously companies that have, all the right licenses. They've got good quality relationships with large class enterprises. A combination of obviously doing reclamation work at the data center space. Sometimes they're also looking at going all the way back to, the desktop or the device area, and really making sure that these business owners are thinking about, how do I develop a recurring revenue model, to the ITAD market? And there's some companies out there that have done a really good job at that. But by and large, what is the footprint? What's been the revenue growth and EBITDA growth of the entity over a period of time? And who are their end customers? I think most of the time we're seeing that these ITAD providers are providing services to large class, sort of global, 2,500 firms. I mean, most smaller companies, whether it be Soho or even the SME market, they're really not needing ITAD services as much as the big companies. So that's really what we're seeing in the marketplace, and the interest from buyers, and also geographical presence. There's some ITAD providers that don't have a West Coast presence, that are East Coast, or vice versa. And I think that's very helpful, because getting product from point A to point B can be extremely expensive.
Right. So, Rike, back to you. When XSI was approached by Evernext, they did like the fact that we had an ITAD certification. So, what have you seen in terms of the value that can bring to an organization when they're getting acquired?
Yeah, Todd, I think that XSI definitely saw some revenue growth coming out of that process, right? You were able to capture additional clients, and so certifications are actually a prerequisite for a lot of enterprises to even look at you as an ITAD provider. So, and then the ASCDI ITAD certification that you have kind of takes it to another level with ethics and services verification. So, I mentioned earlier that on the buy side, they're looking for controls. They're looking for how they mitigate risk, including future revenue risk. That's the certification is one of those key building blocks that you need to have in place to be able to grow in the future.
Gotcha. Lenny, to you, you guys do M&A seller side legal representation. What are some of the keys? We had to go through an extensive due diligence process with an outside big accounting firm, which was very undaunting. But what are some of the things that you would recommend as a company if you're a year to two out that you start looking at to prepare for a due diligence scenario?
First, thank you actually to Joe and all of you for allowing me to join this. So the lawyer in the room is an unusual thing at an event like this. So thank you. First of all, you got to get organized. The sale of a business is not significantly different than the sale of a house, right? You got to make it clean, got to make it pretty. You got to show everybody how beautiful you really are. And an organized mess with regard to your documents, your finances or otherwise is just going to put off everybody. Whether you do a quality of earnings analysis on the accounting side, something that Dave always advocates. But your accounting needs to be set up, and then you got to look at all your documents. And it sounds really boring, but because you lived through it, 600 individual requests in diligence was a bear. And if you don't have the materials, for example, your foundation documents, your equity plans, HR, insurance, and so on, it sounds really boring, and it is. But if you're not well planned to do this, you're toast, because the efforts to sell your business is enormous. You were kind enough to say that we helped you in your sale, and we used our platform Deal Driver to do it. But whatever you're doing, you need talented people. You had a bunch of people on your team. So you got to find people you can trust that also will keep their lips sealed with regard to disclosures to others, and get things organized early, so that you're not racing to a closing. You're walking yourself carefully, and you can focus on the issues that you really need to confront, because no deal closes without problems. And you need to be focused on keeping your revenue up and your expenses down, and drive the deal to close. So be organized, get your house ready, get pretty, and go sell.
Yep. I'll get right back to you, but Dave, one of the things I think is important is a lot of companies that sell are, it's a family business, or there's personal expenses. I mean, you run personal expenses through, because if I can wrap a vacation around a particular destination for an association meeting, what are some of the things that in preparing financials or thinking about financials ahead of time that you want to start looking at in terms of adding value back for the offer price?
Yeah, I mean, the push pull is that closely held business owners are told by a lot of their advisors, let's lower the EBITDA, let's lower the cash flow, let's pay as little tax as possible. So that may be running a boat, an expensive car lease that may or may not be used for business, or all sorts of things through the business. But when adding those things back, really it's adjusted EBITDA. And really what you have to look at is, are those costs or are those expenses going to be there day one post-acquisition by the new buyer? Most likely not. So you take those things, you go back 12 months, you say, okay, what's non-recurring, what's an owner add back, and you have the opportunity to obviously increase EBITDA. And it's a very important exercise, because if someone's paying, 7x, that's $7 for every $1 you add, it can be material in nature. So if you're adding back $500,000, in that scenario, you're getting $3.5 million. So it's a really important exercise to go through. Some, obviously add backs are legit and rational, and some, buyers may question, but it's certainly something that you're going to want to go through to make sure that you're giving buyers a very good, fair, honest appraisal of what the free cash flow of the business is.
That's right. Thanks for that. And Lenny, back to you. What, that's some of the financial aspect of things. What are some of the legal aspects of things in terms of, when I sell my company, what am I legally responsible for, and why is it so important to have representation to protect my interests?
So there's a bunch of issues that pop up in every deal that are critical for the seller. Like, for example, the purchase price. What's composed in the purchase price? Cash, rollover equity. Rollover equities is, they buy you for 10 million and they want you to roll 2 million back into the private equity firm for a future sale of the enterprise. Your contingent purchase price, namely earnout. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. And then escrow holdback. Some portion of the purchase price is going to be held for a period of time that the buyer is confident that everything that you represented is actually true. There's a section of the agreement that you have to sign off on, which I call the trust but verify element. It's not just due diligence. There's a representation and warranty. You as the seller are signing your life on the line, including potentially a forever clause that essentially anything with regard to fraud, you're always going to be responsible for. But the reps and warranties are rather detailed. They used to be 3 or 4 pages long, and now they're like 15, 20 pages. One instance recently, 147 individual reps and warranties that the seller had to respond to. And those cover your liability up to the purchase price in some places, and we negotiate down to try to bring that to a percentage of the purchase price without the expertise that we can bring to the table, or any good lawyer can bring to the table. You'll get tagged for things. Tax structuring, assets versus equity. You want to make it as tax efficient as possible for you as the seller. There are advantages for buyers to buy things on an asset basis, and they should gross you up if they're doing that because they get an advantage. Earnouts are an issue. They can be great, but they're fraught with many difficulties, and how to protect you when you're no longer the owner and you're no longer driving the bus. Can you really set direction of where the bus is going to turn? So keep that in mind. And then guardrails around liability exposure. What's your exposure for a problem? What's the survival period for those reps and warranties that I just made a big deal about? What about, do you have insurance today? You can get a tail on the insurance that you have today to protect you downstream with regard to those reps and warranties. And what are you doing after the sale? Are you sticking around? And what's your role going to be, and how you're going to execute on that role? These are all critical issues for you as a seller. It's not just cut the check and leave. Maybe it's an all cash deal and you're getting all up front and you're walking away, and God bless you. But that's not normally what in a buyer's market, which we have somewhat today. It's not what you're probably going to get offered, and so you're going to need some help.
Yeah, and one big thing, especially in the United States, is state tax.
Yeah,
so
sales tax.
There's a reason why I live in Texas and not Georgia anymore.
That's right. And a lot of people are running businesses where they don't think they touch sales tax issues, particularly for technology companies, or if you have a technology implementation with regard to what you're doing. SaaS services in many states is sales tax laden, and people don't even know that. The sales tax and actually individual income taxes are important. And if you're going to be planning way ahead, you get a wealth manager to sit down with you and go through. You'll see people that will move a year or two before they sell their business, so they can land in a comfortable zone, as Todd, you have done, and Dave's shaking his head in agreement as well. It's an important plan for wealth management. Even if the wealth is not FU wealth that you're never going to work again, but you're going to want to try to hold on to as much as you can. So speak to some wealth management professionals.
Yeah. And then while we're on you, I hadn't heard of a flat rate M&A firm, and when I found you guys, I was so happy. But how are you able to do that versus other law firms?
In the first instance, we do it because we all owned businesses prior. We were lawyers at big law firms. We left, we ran businesses, and then we came back to the practice, and we've changed the model. We don't live on the model of having lots of associates and junior partners working for us and lots of fancy tall buildings with glass walls and marble tables. We cut that out. We deploy labor in a different way, so that we bring people in sort of like on a contractor model as necessary. We have teams that we use constantly so that there's familiarity. Like we've done 5 deals in the third-party maintenance ITAD space over the past couple of years. So we know the space well, and our team knows the space well. And then we utilize technology significantly. As you mentioned, you had 600 requests, and you had 20 or 30 people on the other side across from your small team of 5 or 6 people. And the burden was great, but that use of technology was a you say a lifesaver for you, but it helped made the deal more efficient for you to run your business. And doing that essentially makes the deal easier to manage, because it is a difficult thing to manage. Everybody on this panel knows how hard it is to sell a business successfully and be happy at the end. And that just requires a lot of work up front and a constant attention for the period of time that you're on the block.
Well said. I mean, every transaction is a heavy lift. I mean, oftentimes we talk to business owners and say, well, this is going to be an easy deal. And I've been doing this for 30 years and I'm 250 plus deep. There's no such thing as an easy deal. It doesn't work that way.
Doesn't happen.
No,
it just doesn't. Even the easiest of easiest deals is not easy. It just isn't. There's always a wrench, and it's oftentimes no one's fault. I mean, I've had deals where it is people's fault, and the deals break down and they get retraded. And that's exactly what you want to avoid. Is you want, as everybody's talking today, get ready, get ready, get ready. You can't say it enough. The more prepared you are, the less likely you'll have a surprise. But it doesn't mean the deal will be simple. It just won't.
Yeah, Lenny, you made a great point about just how difficult and how distracting a deal can be for the management of the company. What I've seen in my own business and others is that the burden on the owner, on the senior management team to pull together all this mountains of data really takes their eye off the ball, or it can. And so you've got to be very careful about losing control of the business in the midst of all this.
Where your sales start to dip, and then all of a sudden there's a renegotiation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Eric, on the buy side, and I think this will be the last conversation that we have, and I'll involve the whole group. What are some of the things that you guys see as being more valuable in the market as you're looking at companies that you would acquire?
Yeah, we're fortunate just because of the scale that we've got, and I've been inquisitive in the past, and that we happen to see a lot of deals that come through. There's certainly ones that we seek out, but then there's as kind of deals are being put together and books are being put together. We have a look at a lot of those, and so we have a pretty good vantage point to see a lot of different businesses out there, and so we kind of see what we think is good and obviously not as good about it. When I think about kind of the positive things in there, I kind of start with capability, and then obviously you've got to be good at what you do. But if you just do one thing really well, it's probably not as interesting as doing multiple things well. So if you're really good in the ITAD side, but you also do deployment, then that's going to be more interesting to somebody like us. And it not just because we're interested in deployment, but just because it's a broader capability set to kind of put you in a different conversation. Geodiversity is important, I think. And again, whether that's East Coast, West Coast, or whether that's US and LATAM, you can structure that lots of different ways. But when you look at kind of what Tess had, that's one of the reasons. Another reason we got the valuation that we got, because we had lots of diversity. We're in lots of different places to service the type of clients that we're privileged to service. Like, which it kind of goes into the client side of things, and you want long-standing contractual relationships. If we look at a business and it's more of a transactional type model, or the relationships are, the bigger relationships are pretty new, or it's not very diverse, meaning like two clients make up 70% of the revenue or something like that, and that those aren't great things. So kind of consistent programmatic relationships, but with some diversity revenue. So if one of those clients were to go away, it wouldn't hurt too bad. I'd also say clean systems is part of it. I mean, I think we all, at different points in time struggle with technology and IT, whether it's reporting or warehouse management systems or financial systems, that gets harder. I can attest to it as you scale in it. Having something that produces the information that you need, that you can count on, whether that's from financials or, again, client reporting or something like that, something where somebody's going to be able to come in and run a tight ship and be able to trust the data that they're dealing with is pretty important. And I think the only other thing I'd say, one of the things Dave mentioned earlier was around EBITDA adjustments. Every deal we look at has, there's adjustments and all you expect that, and that's fine. And a lot of people stretch those adjustments to the extent to where there's kind of trust issues out of the gate in it. And so disclosing all that, being very transparent around what those adjustments are, not trying to kind of stretch the truth, I think is the right way to approach those things. Just because it gets, they're going to get to anybody that's kind of worth their salt is going to get to it anyway, and so it's just best to put it all out on the table very transparently at the beginning with. And people like us are very accepting of those adjustments, that kind of fall into that. If we're not going to have to pay for somebody's car next year, then that kind of comes out. That kind of is an add back in it that makes sense. But there's other things that don't make sense that we see all the time. And so that's just I guess some advice that I've seen. It's a bit of a turnoff when we kind of see it the other way.
Yeah. Excellent information, Eric. And you brought up something, Dave, that I want to touch on. Putting a book together and marketing yourself to, a lot of different companies. Is that the best way to get the biggest, the highest offer for your company?
I mean, it can be. I mean, there's sort of different ways to sell a business. I think I have a slide in here that will sort of show that. I mean, there's, pros and cons of each. So, one is preemptive, one is a targeted solicitation, one's a controlled auction, and one's a very broad-based auction. And each have advantages and disadvantages. It really depends upon what the goal and objectives are of the selling shareholders. It's not a one size fits all sort of solution set. So I think, when you have a closely held business owners thinking about a liquidity strategy, they really have to spend time strategizing with a banker, someone like Rike or ourselves, and even bringing in, a lawyer or an accountant on a deal team and saying, okay, how do I want to move the ball down the field and what's the best solution for me? So certainly a lot of our clients like us to build offering memorandums, go to market, talk to, sometimes 8, 15, as many as 20 groups. I mean, we're not like a Harris Williams or another banker where they're going to go out and, show the book to, 75, 100, 150 groups. We're just not like that, because if you're bidding on businesses like that, why are you the smartest guy in the room? When you get book 105 and you're the headline price. So, that's the benefit of being sort of inch wide, mile deep, only doing IT services and software, is we sort of know, who's in the space and who's buying, who's sort of in the self-imposed penalty box, and who's looking to potentially liquidate.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like an undaunting task for the seller. I mean, are you guys managing most of that process in terms of let's say you put 25 books out there. Do I have to have a conversation with 25? How many of the 25 are going to be interested in having a conversation? And then as the executive, how many conversations do I have to have with these,
Yeah, in that example, I mean, it probably would get whittled down to maybe 5 or 6 conversations that senior management or the CEO would have access to. So think of it as a funnel. You're sort of green, yellow, red lighting each buyer as you sort of move the ball down the field in the process. And you're seeing, and you just know, I mean, after doing it for a period of time, the quality of the questions you're getting, how motivated the buyer is. And look, at the end of the day, deals don't get done unless you have a motivated buyer and a motivated seller. It's as simple as that. And you can just tell the motivation on behalf of different buyer groups. If it takes you 3 weeks to get an NDA signed from a buyer, well, it's probably highly unlikely that dog's not going to hunt. But, if you get somebody else, that's asking smart questions, that's leaning in, that, is curious about the business, then we put our attention that direction.
Mm-hmm. And how often does a company try to sell this year and it just doesn't work out?
Well, I mean, there can be, I don't have percentages. I mean, most everything that we take on, we get done because we obviously underwrite and do our own DD, and we sort of know the market, know what we can get done and know what we can't get done. But I would assume that there's obviously situations where, companies aren't prepared. They sort of do a shotgun start. They find it to be either daunting or they're unprepared. They pull back and then say, okay, let's bring some real people in to get it done. We don't have a lot of experience in that. Most all the transactions we're involved in, if they're not ready for the dance and not ready for prime time, then we'll get them prepped and we'll make the necessary introductions and say, look, at this time, just being ruthlessly honest with you, you need another, fiscal year, you need another couple of quarters to get prepared, to get ready. And so we often see that.
Eric, on the buy side, I mean, what kills a deal from you guys? Is it the lack of organization by the company in terms of the financials or recordings and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, once we've kind of gotten to that point, we've identified a target, we've kind of made the decision it's the right thing for us. We've engaged, in the conversation, made an offer, that offer has been, accepted with caveats. Maybe we start in due diligence. It's usually in the financials somewhere where it might come apart from there. It could be in to Rike's earlier point, identifying risk, and it can be there as well. That's hasn't happened as much for us. It's more been when we've kind of dug into the numbers, we found things that were surprises that that were either deal killers or were just findings that wanted made us to renegotiate the price, and obviously the buyer may not want to do that based on whatever that finding is. So typically it's kind of stuff. I wouldn't say it's not stuff that's undisclosed, but it's just stuff that we didn't find until we got into diligence that were surprises to us that kind of maybe set us on a different course.
Yeah. And Rike and Dave, if I'm a seller and I get into that situation and the deal starts to go downhill, what resources are available out there to me that can come in and help get things fixed?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the legal side, the accounting side, there's the banking side. So there's a wealth of access to information. What I would say is, look, don't pollute the marketplace. Don't sort of, burn a potential buyer. Just get prepared, get prepped. And, I think that over the years, what we tell people, look, there's a blueprint on how to sell a business. There's a right way and a wrong way. And if you haven't done it before, then that's fine. But I think that we always advise people to retain the necessary team to get it done.
Yeah, from my perspective, if a deal's falling apart, I'm going to call Dave, but just get some help and advice there. But I'd say that bravery is important. That the deal is going to feel like it might fall apart at various points during the negotiation. So if you just kind of got to stay the course and make sure that you've got your act together at a time.
And Lenny, from a legal perspective, in the final negotiations, what goes on? Is it one of those things where you got to pick your battle on certain items?
Yeah, you have a certain amount of both trust and political capital that you can only use up so much. So there's going to be a series of battles. Maybe it's fighting over the working capital adjustment. How much cash you have to leave behind in order for the business to operate. I think you're going to be fighting over the EBITDA much earlier on, but that's a huge fight usually in the very beginning. And then the earn-out details will be something that you will fight over substantially at the end. but you can't fight over every single thing. You know, it may be your business, it may be you're the owner, but you're not going to win every battle. And if you start to destroy the trust, or bend, you know, you want the other side to bend so much to your hand because you're the owner, you're going to lose. There's some things worth fighting over, and towards the end, earn out, the liability exposure, you know, what your role is going to be, you know, post close and so on, and obviously the tax treatments are all going to be critical things. You're not going to be, and you're not going to be fighting on all four of those. You're going to be picking one or two, maybe three that you're going to be, you know, put your foot down and say, I can't move on this. And by the way, you know, the strongest word you can ever use is no, but you can't use no on everything. So when you use it, you know, be prepared to walk if you have to. But as Dave and Rike and Eric have all said, prepare. You don't. You hopefully will do this once in your life. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to do it a second time or a third, but that's rare. So if you're going to do it once, assemble a team, prepare, and then go into it knowing that there's going to still be a fight, but you've done everything you can up front to get it done.
Excellent. Have a question come in. What do you tell your employees when you're getting ready to sell? And I think, Rike, maybe you could answer that one.
Oh, well, you know, what you tell them and when you tell them are both important things. You know, you have to, and it really is part of the selling process. You want to think through this as well as you know, how will this impact my employees? How will they be affected? How will their livelihoods and their lifestyles be affected by this change? Because it is a change. To the extent that you can, you want to, you know, put them at ease because you've already talked with the buyer about the impact on the employees. You've kind of planned ahead and thought that through. So, you know, again, trust is a big part of this. So don't start being untrustworthy at this moment. You know, you've got to maintain those employee relationships and make sure that they are invested in the success of the future company.
And Eric, I imagine that when you buy a company, you want the employees, especially the great ones that have held got the company where they are today, to make them acquirable.
Yeah, I mean, that's incumbent upon every buyer, in my opinion. And, you know, you're not just buying revenue in most cases, sometimes, but that, to me, those aren't very interesting deals. You're buying talent in a lot of cases. And if you kind of go back to a point in time and look at, you know, what Arrow did, which is maybe one of the worst examples of all the acquisitions that got done, they had a lot of talent and they couldn't manage the talent. And then there was a lot of other things that were kind of spiced in with that. So if you don't recognize that a big part of the assets you're buying is talent, you're making a huge mistake. And what a lot of people also do, they may recognize that, but they don't incentivize that talent to stay, or, you know, or don't kind of tie them up, golden handcuffs, whatever you want to call it. So to me, identifying, you know, understanding it, identifying who that talent is, and making sure that they're incentivized to stay for a long time is pretty critical.
Talking about minimum deal size. I mean, is there a minimum that you guys would look at, Eric? You know, got to be $5 million EBITDA or more, or, you know, do you have any standard, you know, number like that?
There's not a hard and fast number, I wouldn't say. I'd say once you kind of get sub 15 million in it, that tends to not have as much structure to it. You know, systems aren't as great. Maybe don't have all the right certifications or all the resources they need. So, and that's going to be different. That's, you know, maybe just because we've got some scale in it, but I think you've got to kind of be in that, you know, 15, 20 plus million range to have something that is kind of built the way that we want it to be built to jump in. But again, that's probably just more because we've already got a fair amount of scale.
Yep. Dave, are you seeing deals go sub 15 million?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there's got to be something that's, you know, points of distinction and uniqueness, right? I mean, as Eric's saying, I mean, it just can't be a Me Too company, but, you know, bigger companies get bigger multiples. Yeah. So, you know, that's the key there.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. If you think about, you know, kind of the two large ones that happened last year with Tess and with Iron Mountain, and both of them had scale, both in terms of revenue and in terms of, you know, capability. They had some uniqueness to them in it. So to me, both those were pretty differentiated sales versus some of the other ones that we've seen, you know, over the past 10 years or so, just because of the amount of scale and because they had, there was some specific focus and capability that both Tess and IT Renew offered. So to me, that was kind of critical. And, you know, going back to what Dave said about valuations, both, I think it's pretty public, the valuation we got and the valuation that IT Renew got were significantly higher. And that's because of that scale and because of that kind of specific capabilities that we're able to bring to the table.
Great.
And here's a slide that we put together on some of the players that are in the space. I mean, combination of public, private, some of the data, you never know on the private stuff. It's a combination of PitchBook, Cap IQ, Bloomberg. Obviously Eric will let us know if it's right or if it's wrong. But, these are some of the bigger players out there on the block, as you can see, as far as employees and sort of revenue and everything else.
Yep. Thanks, Dave. Joe, any last comments?
No, just fantastic. I really appreciate you guys. You guys know what you're doing. You've done it before. I sold my company, many years ago, and it's a long journey. It took us about 8 months of back and forth with the buyer, but it was done. But that was a different time, different place, and you guys are really in touch with what's going on today. So I want to thank you very much for the session.
Yep. Thanks for having us, Joe.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our next session is going to be with TCO. We'll see you guys in about 60 seconds there. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Great job, everybody. Thank you so much.